Good morning, everybody. I am Matthew Shilvock, the General Director of San Francisco Opera, and I want to thank you for joining us this morning. I am so honored to be joined by the star of our weekend stream of Falstaff, the extraordinary bass baritone, Sir Bryn Terfel. Sir Bryn made his debut with us in 1995 for Sir Charles Macaris's 70th birthday concert, and he returned as Mozart's Figaro in 1997, Nick Shadow in 99, and then this Falstaff in 2013. Sir Bryn is one of the most revered artists on the opera stage, renowned not only for his elegant artistry and masterful characterizations, but also his warm humanity and generosity of music making. He was knighted by the Queen in 2017 and has also been awarded the Freedom to the City of London, in addition to being a winner of Grammys, Brit Awards, Gramophone Awards, and having a whiskey named after him, but more on that later. In addition to his highly in-demand opera appearances, he builds bridges with many other musical traditions and artists. A great spokesperson for his native Wales, he has continued to live in Wales, from where he joins us today. Bryn, thank you so much for being with us as we launch this stream of this production of Falstaff.
Morning.
Good morning, Bryn. Good evening.
Thank you for saying my surname perfectly.
Well, growing up a couple of miles from the Welsh border, I have to get it right. Bryn, how are you? And do you see any signs of spring emerging there in Wales at the moment?
Yes. Well, of course, we're about to embark on our celebrations in Wales for our patron saint, March the 1st, St. David.
St. David.
And I will do my first bit of singing since the summer in a concert with the BBC, no audience, just the orchestra. So I'm very excited to be back on a platform, most probably enjoying to hear an orchestra live again. These simple things are things that have happened to us from the day we opened that first stage door. So there's a little story behind that. I would have done a recital in Monte Carlo a couple of days ago, which meant I would have had to isolate for 10 days. So therefore I'd have missed this concert, or I'd have missed a recital in Zurich as well. So I asked politely the Monte Carlo Opera to maybe postpone the recital, and they were very forthcoming, and Jean-Louis Grindard said, of course, and I didn't want to really travel before I'm so close to getting the vaccine as well.
Well, and not to miss that important concert in Wales, to have that moment of return to music making be in Wales. And what does St. David's Day mean to you in Wales? Are there specific traditions that you uphold in your family around the patron saint's day?
No, it's a day that you're proud of your Welshness, you're proud of your culture, you're proud of your language. And St. David said, do the little things. And of course, little things sometimes matter. And we try to adhere to that. So in our concert, it will be a mixture of Welsh folk tunes, Welsh hymns, as per usual. Some orchestral pieces by the BBC Wales Orchestra as well. Unfortunately, most probably the schools cannot celebrate as per usual, because most of them are closed now. It's just the primary schools that are open to children under the age of 7. So my 3-year-old girl, Lily, has started school last week, and she was very excited. So yes, on top of the fact that, as you already mentioned, spring has sprung, the daffodils are out, well timed for our patron saint's day. It's not like St. Patrick's Day that the Irish can celebrate so brilliantly across the world. But you know what the Irish are? They're Welshmen that could swim.
Excellent. And you talked about the daffodils, and I'm trying to remember, the people wear daffodils, but also little leeks, right, on St. David's Day?
Yes, the leek has been worn by the warriors. Think of the song "Men of Harlech," for instance. I think it was something to do with the order of the Welshmen. You could smell them on the way with their rotting leeks. So Of course, we have a penchant also to cooking the leeks, especially in a nice cawl, which is a soup. It's all simple foods, of course, in Wales, meats and two veg, and usually a leek cooked in many different ways.
Oh, you're making me homesick, Bryn. Let me ask you a little bit more about this, because one of the things I've always appreciated about you is how you connect music to community, and you've never stopped doing that, no matter how many stages on the world you're singing in, and you're bringing back of music to Wales, to the British Isles. You had your festival in Wales. You've recorded several albums of folk songs, and you've maintained your home in Penarth, which they say is just a couple of hours from where I grew up. And I'll never forget the donor event you did for us back in 2013 when we were doing Falstaff. And you led us at the end of that in a collective sing-along of the Scottish song Loch Lomond. And I never forget that moment. It was just one of the most amazing things I've experienced. How important is that sense of place to you? And has it always been important to you? Was it important growing up, or is it something you've come to as you have kind of moved through your musical career?
Oh, undoubtedly, Matthew. I'm always asked the question, why do Welsh people have a tendency to sing? And of course, 600 AD, there was a tombstone in North Wales that had the first inscription in Welsh. So go through the centuries and you have incredible bards like Taliesin and Aneurin, who were incredible poets and using this beautiful language, going through to those magnificent medieval stories called the Mabinogion. There are 11 stories, 7 about the Arthur legend and the rest about brilliant Welsh characters, like a prince that could turn into an eagle, or a giant that would lie across the sea between Wales and Ireland to create a bridge for the princess. So very imaginative. And then we go into the industrial era, and you had coal was very important in the southern part of Wales. Therefore, there was a huge influx of men to Wales because they wanted miners. And then all of a sudden, churches were built, nearly 500 new churches. So something to get out of this incredibly difficult and dangerous work. These men would go to church and sing hymns. And lo and behold, male voice choirs were started. And they were singing because it was something that would make them forget their daily routine of going into those pits, which was incredibly difficult in those times. Right. So there's a broad aspect of the fact that singing has been in our culture. You always think of an Italian baritone, for instance. That fach of voice is so special. You can imagine the father cradling the babies, singing in that very high, beautiful Italian legato. Whereas in Wales, you have the more bass baritonal, and then the tenorial. So the tenors were really small, tiny. Even Sir Geraint Evans used to say that Stuart Burroughs' bum was closer to the ground than his. and therefore we were very lucky in the sense that you'd have an incredible plethora of hymns to be sung in church. And then Cum Ronda, for instance, I'm sure you know that hymn, yes. Bread of heaven, bread of heaven. It's sung in the rugby stadiums. It's even sung in soccer matches when they taunt the opposite team. You're not singing anymore. You're not singing. You're not singing. So this is something my parents love to sing. My dad has this beautiful Ivan Rebrov voice that has a bass quality, but also this very, very high register. And my mum's a soprano. They both sing in different choirs.
Oh, they do.
So I was curious from a very young age about singing. And I didn't hide the fact that I'd love to jump on a chair and sing to people. So is it in your blood? Is it because of the language? Yes. So therefore, I think 7 vowels, A, E, I, O, U, kind of lends itself to somebody who wants to start singing. And you
Right.
start singing by folk tunes or by singing with a harp. It's called cerdant. It's called, not a good translation, it's called tooth music.
Tooth music.
But it's when you sang beautiful poetry to the accompaniment of a harp, which then gave you a set of rules, a little bit like the community in Nuremberg.
Right, and the troubadours and these traditions where you pass
Hans Sachs we would have had in our village.
Yes.
He would have been the bard that everybody goes to with their shoes. And so we had then the Eisteddfod, which is where people compete against each other. So if you can't sing, having talked about all that, there's something that's gone particularly wrong in your childhood. Maybe you've gone to edge towards sports or something completely different. But singing was always in my family historically, and the biggest thing was to leave Wales and actually go to London to study. So that was the snowball beginning to roll.
And were your parents then very proud of you for following this trajectory and activating that into a full career?
Undoubtedly. Leaving the square mile, as I just said, was one of the most difficult things. So the first 3 or 4 weeks in that college in London was very difficult. But then I said to myself, yes, the Guildhall School of Music and Drama. And I had ventured to London because the singing teacher of Sir Geraint Evans was still teaching there, a man called Arthur Reckless. So I had Arthur Reckless for 3 years teaching me English song, purely English song, nothing else, no opera arias, just English song. He clearly knew that this voice needed a little bit of time to develop, and that I needed to kind of work out everything that I was doing, breathing wise, the way I stood in a lesson. He was a very, very, very clever singing teacher, brilliant accompanist. And therefore, and because of his history as a bass baritone singer as well, he had that incredible repertoire. So it gave me a great start at the Guildhall, and he impressed on me to be in the library for most of my free times, catching up on listening to singers, listening to repertoire. So over 4 years, I learned a lot of songs, and I used to drag students into the music room to sing duets, trios, and quartets. And therefore, when my career started, I already knew most of the Mozart recitatives, duets, trios, quartets. So it's something that you have to tell yourself, this is the time to actually start enjoying what you have on that plate. It's such a palette of multicolors that you'd be stupid not to impress upon it.
Right. Did you trust in his pedagogy in making you work through those songs at the time? Were you pushing against that and saying, no, I want to do these big roles? Or, I mean, that can be such a difficult thing for some young singers in terms of how they think they should be pacing and how their teacher thinks they should be pacing. And how did you navigate that?
Well, he was so correct in everything that he did. I used to bring in bass arias like Fiesco's Il Lacerato Spirito from Simone Boccanegra. I'd say, Arthur, I've got this aria. And he says, no. I have this song by Finzi that you should learn. So that was my 3 years. But then I left him before my venturing into the opera school. And then I had another teacher called Rudolf Piene, and then he was one to master his class with a rod of iron. And that's when I really started to develop a passion for learning songs. I'd have to learn 3 or 4 by memory every week, which was not only for competitions, but for his singing classes. And that was really dedicated, hard work. And then the opera arias tended to come in now and again in between all these magnificent leads that Rudolf used to teach, because he was originally from Berlin.
Right. And you mentioned the Mozarts, and of course, you are so iconically associated with those roles, and as I mentioned, you sang Figaro on our stage as well back in the 90s, and now, of course, taking on the sort of heroic roles of Wotan and Hans Sachs and so forth, and these very impressive and sort of full roles. Does doing the Mozarts help in preparation for that? I'm kind of always curious as to how the Mozarts, the Handel sometimes, and as you say, in your case, the English song repertoire as well. Does that actually help prepare you for these heavier Helden roles?
Well, Matthew, you have to remember that I had nostalgia and a sense of nervousness with all the roles that I would learn, because Sir Geraint Evans had sang everything that I was starting to learn.
Right.
And I'd met him a couple of times, and he'd just sat me down and told me what I should be doing. He was the first man to have run Sir George Solti for me to go and have an audition with him. And I was given Antonio the Gardener. That was my very first professional concert series with people like Ferruccio Furanetto as Figaro.
Yes.
Some brilliant. Anne-Sophie von Otter was Cherubino. So just a magnificent cast of really lovely colleagues that love to give an impression to a young singer and be there.
Was this a Covent Garden or?
No, this was just a tour of many different cities. Yeah. So undoubtedly, I would say Mozart is a calling card for a young singer. And any opera house around the world will have Mozart in their seasons. So therefore, Figaro was very, very evident in my first 15 years. Not to say that it's not a difficult role to sing, because it's quite long, lots of arias, lots of duets, trios. So there is a sense of having to pace yourself within that opera as well. But it stands you in good stead for, as you mentioned, moving into the heavier roles like Johannahan in Salome, and of course Wotan in the Ring Cycle. But my Wagnerian career was very short, so I've already hung my boots up where Wotan is concerned, because there's purely no space in the calendar now for returning to those kind of long rehearsal periods, and I can't see opera houses even conceiving of putting a Ring Cycle, although I just read that the English National Opera are going to put a Ring Cycle on. So yeah, I think I've been careful, Matthew, in the fact that I always tried to give myself time in between performances as well to rest. And as Hans Hotter famously said, some of the best singing that I've ever had is in this actual music room.
Yes.
So whatever you try and learn here, you try and implement that on the stage. I cannot go to an opera house and start singing the Te Deum as loud as I can at the end of Act 1 of Tosca, which means that then I have nothing left in the petrol can for the second act, which is most probably one of the most iconic and most important scenes ever for a bass baritone singer. So these are the things that you learn in your studio. So technically, I would say singing Mozart is as singing Wagner, because Wagner gives you that breadth of colors as well. He gives you great dynamics. You can always step to the right side of the stage and keep away from that left section of the orchestra, which is where the brass are, especially in the beginning of Rheingold, for instance. Just keep to the right, and you should be fine.
A good tip.
Yes.
I'm curious, Bryn, because you have taken on so much breadth of repertoire, and as with any singer who has the wonderful career that you've had, you move through different parts of it, and you leave roles behind and so forth. And you just said Wotan being a big one. Are there roles, no matter how big or small, that you really miss, that you would that were so fun to do, or that just gave you such a high when you did them that you, even if you won't go back to them, you have a particular nostalgia for them?
Yes, the role of Figaro, the role of Leporello, but I knew once that I became a certain age that I couldn't be seen performing that role. I didn't have the youthfulness and the vocal fireworks that one has without even thinking about it, Matthew, you know? So when you start singing Wagner, at the age I am now, 55, I think I have more of a thinking of style, of interpretation, of how to take care of the voice, of dynamics. It might not sound as good as it did when I was in my 30s, but I can still sing a Schubert song rather well, and I can sing a Welsh hymn to the same standard. So it's very important to know where your limits are, but it's also to know where your strengths are and when to hang up those boots, and that's very important. Hans Sachs, for instance, I would have loved to have come to San Francisco to do your Meistersinger. I know one of our colleagues pulled out. Right. I would have been on that plane immediately, but Hans Sachs you have to have under your hats just constantly, because it's if I would be looking at him again now, it would be like learning a new opera.
Right. And is that mainly the text that makes it that way, or just the entirety of the role?
The entirety of the role, and somehow Wagner's writing in Meistersinger, for some reason, is very different. I can remember all the monologues perfectly, but the duet, for instance, with the Beckmesser, with the knocking on the shoe and everything, it's just a different sphere. So yes, I did 2 new productions of the Meistersinger, which seems such a pity that I'm not doing it again. But as I said, it's not in the next 4 years of my diary. So I can't imagine myself singing it when I'm nearly 60.
Well, we will see, and we will try and give you more notice next time. I mean, one of the roles that has been a real through line for you for many years now is perched on your right hand shoulder there, and that poster from La Scala, and obviously what we're going to be watching soon here on the stream, and that is Falstaff. And it's a role that you have really owned in such an amazing way for years now. I first saw you doing it in Houston when I was there with David back in 2005, I think it was. And you've gone on to perform it in many locations, and you have it coming up this summer at Grange Park Opera. You mentioned in a recent interview that it was your favorite opera to perform, and I just wondered what makes it so for you.
Good question. Well, I started singing it in the '99. I sang it at Opera Australia in a beautiful production. So that is again the key that unlocks the door. A good production in your first tryout of such a role stays with you forever. But it doesn't say that you turn up with preconceived ideas. I like a clean slate with Falstaff, because he has many different looks. This roly-poly knight with his very questionable friends. What a dreadful mistake to write two letters to 2 different ladies, and already he's being found out.
Right.
It's a very clever score. I have a score here in the house that I go back to whenever I restart learning or looking at Falstaff. It's a ricordi facsimile of the very first written score that Verdi gave to the publishers.
Okay.
So it has corrections, and it has certain lines and certain dynamics that you want to adhere to. Certain things are different in different passages. It's a very interesting journey. And of course, historically, Shakespeare was a very difficult to translate. Many composers have, I think, over 500 pieces have been written, but not all successfully.
Right.
But Shakespeare was revered by Verdi, and of course, Boito stepped in 10 years before they had the idea of even writing another comic opera.
Right.
And of course, Arrigo Boito gave him that perfect libretto, a perfect platform. And I'm very happy also to have sung Ford the role with the Welsh National Opera with the director Peter Stein. And he turned up with what could be described as an Encyclopedia Britannica of the score of Falstaff. Every possible sentence was described by Peter,
yes,
from which plays that section comes from. Okay. It's very interesting, and of course, it only adds to what you have on board in your armory in a certain role. For instance, when the ladies laugh in the second scene, you don't see any of the men laughing until right at the end, when they know they've been duped.
Right.
They are cuckolds of the ladies of Windsor. And that's when Falstaff and Ford actually start singing, is right at the end. Ha, 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 ha. Right at the end of the piece. So clever in his writing. And what's beautiful about that opera is everybody has fun.
Yes.
Yes. And I think secretly every conductor wants to conduct it also. So they're also having that fun within the process of putting on a Falstaff performance.
No, it sparkles. It has so much energy, but also so much humanity. And as you say, you take these great works of Shakespeare, and you take them on at your peril sometimes, because they're so, in many cases, so perfectly encapsulated anyway. How do you add to them without it just becoming backing music? And you're right, in this piece, the characterization, I think, is where Verdi really just adds so much. But I also think you add a lot too as well, Bryn, in that. And when I have seen you do it both in Houston and in San Francisco in the same production, the Olivier Tambozzi production, there was something which just stayed with me both times. And I don't know if I can really describe it properly, but you have the way you move your body in it is completely divorced from the music. You watch many people performing roles on stage, and they're kind of in the music and in the rhythm of the music. Your characterization of Falstaff is completely independent of that. The smallest little movements, the smallest little gestures, which just make you seem completely in character. And I just wondered if that was something you work on actively, or we may have lost Bryn. While we are waiting for Bryn to rejoin us, I will encourage everyone to send in your questions using the chat function. Please send those in. They will come into us directly, and I want to make sure we allow for some time for Bryn here. While we're waiting, I also wanted to mention, Bryn, as Bryn noted, there aren't too many companies doing ring cycles at the moment, and for good reason. It's the biggest undertaking one can have. And so, as you know, as I hope you are aware of now, we are doing an online ring festival coming up in March, and these weekend streams that we're doing, we will continue in March with all of the ring operas, one after the other. And I hope that you will tune in for those. And surrounding all of that is this wonderful ring content that we will be sharing with you: lectures, previews, conversations with artists, a whole plethora of activity which you can tune into through the course of that month. And so I really encourage you to check that out. If you go to sfopera.com/ring, you will see what is happening there. We have conversations with Tony Kushner and Alex Ross about Alex's new book on Wagnerism. We have a session with Fred Plotkin and Jamie Barton on food in the ring. We have lectures on what it means to be Brunhilde with Irene Teorin, Nina Stemmer, and Jane Eaglin, all singers who have performed the role of Brunhilde on the San Francisco Opera stage. So a lot to delve into there. And again, those will be following the same process as our Falstaff stream today, in the sense that they will be free to the public from 10 a.m. on Saturday until midnight on Sunday. I am going to see if we can see what's happening. Bryn, you're back.
Yeah, I can't start the video.
Okay. There
we
you are.
go. Yeah, sorry, I guess we had a glitch in our Welsh Wi-Fi.
I'm never sure if it's me or you or whoever, but I was just telling our audience about our virtual ring cycle that we're doing through the month of March, where we're showing our 2018 ring. So we're getting a little bit of Wagner in. I was just asking you, Bryn, I'm not sure how much the question you caught there, but the thing that struck me about your presentations of Falstaff is just how your characterization is so distinct from the music. Your movements are not in sync with the music; they're completely independent. And it was just something very small, but it struck me every time I've seen you do it. And I just wondered, do you work on that, or is that just part of your natural kind of comedic approach to the role?
Well, in the beginning, Matthew, I read a lot about Tito Gobbi and the role. And I also, of course, had a couple of tips from Sir Geraint. He would put a little stone in his left boot, so that Falstaff would have a little bit of a limp. But they're from a generation, they would turn up to the opera house and do their own makeup, and they had their own look.
Right.
And opera houses like San Francisco did indulge Mr. Evans to bring his own productions to San Francisco as well.
Yes.
So he had a particular fine time with all his main roles in the area. So I have to study a score. It tells you how to breathe. It tells you how to move. And the beautiful scenes between Quickly, Alice with Ford, are just full of so many nuances that you can constantly change. And be there and ready to work with any director. And as you say, yes, hopefully my first opera back will be in June in the Grange Park Opera, which is a very tiny opera house for 700 people.
Right,
so
brand
to put
new,
on
right? Just a couple of years old.
Yes, she built that opera house in a year's time, £10 million, and she had an opera house on the garden of a very, very well-known personality in Britain called Bamber Gascoigne, who inherited this humongous house and gave a field to Waspicani to build her Grange in the Forest opera. So as you might click onto the cast, for instance, for her Falstaff, lots of nice young singers in the roles of Nanetta and Fenton, young singers in Caius, Pistola. This opera gives an opera house an opportunity to try out their young singers. I think that's something that's magnificent. It is the opera in a nutshell, especially the two lovers.
Well, you talked, Bryn, about how you come to the role fresh each time, and every production requires something different of it, and you bring something different to it. As you think about taking that back on at Grange Park this summer, how do you think Sir John has fared during the pandemic? Do you think the pandemic has changed him?
Yes, I guess they went through their many pandemics themselves, but theatre still survived. And that's hopefully the light at the end of the tunnel for us, and that vaccine will be the game changer, because in any governmental choice or decision, the people in Britain or in our arts that are self-employed have been very, very low in that ladder. There's been not much help and not much strategy. I wish the government would sometimes have a big thinking tank of very influential people that know about the arts, and not just opera singers, music theatre, ballet dancers, across the board. And I think these young artists now will need our arms around their shoulders. And I really look forward to starting rehearsals with the Grange in the middle of May, hopefully with a vaccine and everything. So So I can see how these young people are faring, having not sung or performed or earned any money for a year.
Oh, I know. I mean, it's been getting hard anyway for young artists, I think, as even before the pandemic, companies doing a little bit less generally on a sort of marginal basis. But now, as you say, these singers who were just about to begin their careers and don't have those resources to draw upon, and in many cases, well, every artist, no matter where you are in your career, most people have lost an entire year's worth of work. And you're right. We have to be there for our young singers. We have to be there for all of our singers.
Undoubtedly. And just to answer, how would John Falstaff have fared? I think he would have gone through brick walls. He celebrates life through wine, food, and women. So and he's bound to find some money somewhere. And he is, of course, that horseback breaker, that mountain of lard, as he is described by the ladies. And there's never a role that you have so much fun in a makeup chair for an hour, being transported into different characters. Brilliant. So already your spirits are pretty high before the opera starts. You're smiling away, sat in whichever part of that scene, and of course I think there's such an importance, Matthew. I don't know what you think as well, to how sets are these days. Singers need a good set.
Right.
I remember saying to the Royal Opera House in Covent Garden when they were about to embark on the Flying Dutchman, and I said to the powers that be, please, I've got a history with my back. So please, as I haven't had ever in any production of the Flying Dutchman, please have a ship and no raked stage. Okay,
sounds good.
I think they misheard me, because there was no ship and there was a big rake. So, can you put a ballet singer on a rake stage? No. Are you going to put a singer on a rake stage? No, because it's not. We're in our music room, flat floors. This is where we stand.
Right.
We like to think we have a perfect passageway to all our technical capabilities, and breath is something that's very important. So in my duet with Dallant, coming down this rake stage, that's the worst I ever sang it in Covent Garden, I remember. So
that's what you're thinking about, right? Is like, how do I get down this rake? How do I?
So, stage designers, they have to be careful now. We've been through a pandemic. Give the audience something nice to look at, and give the singer something very comfortable to bounce off. Your voice has to hit wood somewhere.
Well, this production, Olivier's production, you begin with that huge rising up of the floor, right? And then you come out from underneath, and you've got like the perfect sound wall behind you there. It's amazing.
Well, when I first saw that, Matthew, Olivier Tambosi's Falstaff, I thought, oh no, what are we doing? We're coming up from the depths of an opera house. But you're right, the stage was all wooden. It gave the voices a perfect vehicle in all those incredible ensembles, which you have to be really tight on the ball and ready to keep an eye on that conductor, which is very important.
Oh yeah.
So yes, and of course his look was brilliant in that production, especially when he returned to Ford, all dressed up in his best red
finery. Oh my goodness.
Finery, yeah.
Oh my goodness. Well, before we go to some questions from our audience here, and we've got some good ones coming in, I just wanted to ask you one question about that production, and all the productions you've done. And that production, I think, does a good job with the dunking at the end of Act 2 as you're emptied ceremoniously into the River Thames. And what is the best dunking that you've had in a production of Falstaff?
I think the one from Covent Garden, Robert Carson's production, which a little bit like Mr. Tambosi's production has traveled a lot. His production went to Germany, went to America, obviously, and Mr. Carson's production now. I think opera houses like now to have co-productions.
Oh, yes.
So his production has been to the Met. It's been to Covent Garden. I think, it was in Milan as well. So there is quite a modern kitchen where Falstaff cooks, helps Alicia cook the turkey, and of course eats most of it as well. But he has a tremendous voyage to the Thames, and rightly so.
I saw that production at the Met, and it has a horse in it, right? In one of the scenes, and the horse almost knocked down the set. It was just like backing up into the stable door, and finally someone exited horse stage right. But
yeah, that was changed before it came to London, because only his head was through the stable door then, right. And of course you were giving him a little square of sugar. So he was such an attentive horse, and he would make different puffing noises at the correct time every time, because he knew that piece of sugar was on its way to his mouth.
Oh, I love it. I love it. Well, we have some questions coming in here, Bryn, if I can share some from our audience. Anne Lammers asks, it would be easy to play Falstaff only for comedy, and how do you bring in a feeling human dimension into it?
Well, I've been told sometimes, or people have written about my performance of Falstaff, that I have gone too much into the joviality of the character. But it's very difficult to keep that back, because it's all in the music. And even if you stay still, people still think you're doing too much. But she is exactly right. It's that shaded character that you have to portray in the third act. After the Thames dunking is one of the most human monologues that you could ever have. Yet his powers of recovery, Matthew, are exceptional. That one little warm glass that the taverniere has very, very proudly given him for absolutely no money, of course, no payment, revives Sir John to his quest once again. And was it Anne? She's so right that you have to have that within the role of Falstaff.
Well, you find that balance beautifully, Bryn, and that's what makes you a great Falstaff. A few questions about recording coming in, interestingly, and somebody asks whether you have any plans to record more in the genre of English art song. This particular person, whose name I don't have, just said that your recording of songs of travel put them very much on the road to this genre and exploring it. Have you any plans to record more in there?
Well, it's funnily enough, when you bring up that, there was a Radio 2 program here in Britain that you might be able to get on the iPlayer, that they put 10 different recordings of the songs of travel.
Yes.
And lo and behold, who came in at number one was Malcolm Martineau, my accompanist, and myself. So yes, I'm very proud of that recording, The Vagabond. It was in the early infancy of my contract with Deutsche Grammophon. So I had already recorded a Schubert disc, and then the English song came in. I've done 2 discs of English song, but hopefully I have a score on my piano now of this wonderful song cycle by Schubert, Winterreise, which I never attempted to sing myself. But in conjunction, I'm also learning Maud by Somerville, which is regarded as one of the iconic cycles written by an English composer. So hand in hand, I'm trying to learn both of those in lockdown. So hopefully I will succeed.
Well, I'm hopeful they find their way to disc or to a San Francisco stage. An interesting question here from Martin Vahur. He says, do any recordings exist of you singing as a child or singing with your parents? You mentioned your father's voice. Have you ever recorded with your parents, or is there any vestigial recording of you as a child, Bryn?
There would be some recordings, of course, mostly on Welsh television, of me singing with my parents' choirs, but not singing together as a duet. There is a recording that my parents paid for, and it was actually on the day my voice broke. So I was crying in a recording studio, not knowing what was happening to my voice. I was maybe 12 years old.
Yes.
And my parents do have that recording still, and it's very interesting to listen back to it. But of course, if you Google me as a youngster in the Eisteddfod, you will find many songs sung in Welsh, of course. But it does show you how a voice develops. Nothing was saying that it could be successful, but the journey that the voice took reacted well to being coached and being taught by very good singing teachers and very clever and astute singing teachers that knew how to handle that very precious talent.
Right. Well, and talking of singing in Welsh, our wonderful chairman emeritus, Pitch Johnson, sends in a good question here, and he says, have any operas been written using the Welsh language, and have you sung them?
Good question. No, there's only one opera that I know of, Joseph Parry, Hywel Blodwen. Of course, there have been some commissions by the Welsh National Opera, but not prolific. So maybe that's something my foundation should be looking for in the next decade, to actually have somebody write an interesting opera. Stephen Sondheim always said to me when I met him that he wanted to write something about the Mabinogion, which we've already talked about, which would be a little bit like the Lord of the Rings in essence. And of course, Tolkien famously based that language on Welsh as well. But yes, good question. And I've always wanted to have an opera written with me in mind. Unfortunately, it hasn't happened yet.
I know for a while, Bryn, I remember, because I was curious about this at the time. You were interested in maybe Citizen Kane as a topic, and is that still something which interests you, or is that?
The copyright is at the moment impossible to get through through the Awesome Welsh family. So there's no. I think some opera houses have tried, but it does kind of lend itself.
It really does.
To being in a kind of operatic sense, he's married to a singer, or he's got that beautiful newspaper scene, and of course that the ending of the Rosebud, scene as well.
Right.
Could be magnificent, and even Steven Spielberg to this day says that's his favorite film. Right. Purely because of lighting and how scenes were edited and cut. So, very interesting.
Well, we should not give up on that. I remember being curious and even thinking at the time, like, how could we find the rights for that? And maybe I'll delve back into that and look.
I'm sure Jake Heggie would have a monumental ideas about setting that piece. Yes. It would be right up his sleeve, don't you think?
Oh yes. Oh yeah, absolutely. No, just find the right lyricism and energy and drama in that. Okay. Yeah. We plant some seeds here, Bryn. Isabella Grime says that it seems like you have a special connection to almost everything you sing. How do you develop that kind of reverence for all parts of the repertoire? And do you find that even with music you're reluctant to sing?
Well, Isabella, it's all about listening to the people that coach you and listening to conductors and directors, because most of the time they know much better about it than you do. So be like a sponge and take everything on board. And that's usually conducive to having a good rehearsal period as well. If you listen and react for the first 2 or 3 weeks, then you're friendly and they trust you as an artist, and then you can bring in your own ideas slowly but surely. And I think that's the best way around it, to enjoy a rehearsal period. You have to be there for the hard work and dedication, because you've already done most of the work here at home. So I'm very lucky in the opera directors and the operas that I've actually sung. It's only one production, maybe a Don Giovanni in Paris, that I really detested. But the fact that I was singing with Joseph Van Damme as my Leporello made up for that in leaps and bounds. I didn't care what the production was like, because I had my idol in front of me who might put on a pedestal for 15 years at the Guildhall School of Music and Drama.
Yeah, it's finding there's so many angles into these pieces that we have on stage, and you're right, you can always find something of great value in them.
Yeah. Well, what I've been working I think these come back. So it's like Gianni Schicchi, Tabarro, even The Bear by Walton. So I think, of course, Donizetti and Rossini, they have one-act operas that we've never even heard of. So
they're getting a resurgence now, I think.
Yeah, it's time we bring them back. There's less people on the stage, but as much fun in the orchestra.
Yeah. Daniel Copti writes, he said that you've said in the past that your dogs don't like it when you sing Mephistopheles. Are they fans of any composer in particular?
Yes. Yeah, they're the Sheepdogs in North Wales. Yeah. Unfortunately, now my dad is retired and he has no more sheepdogs on the farm. When I was learning Wotan Valkyrie, that was always such a problem in the music room. It takes so long to rehearse and practice this role. I was driving from South Wales to London, and I put Valkyrie on in the car. I would still have to sit in the car for 2 hours in London before the opera's finished. So just imagine that you have to coach these roles with people. It's just such an Everest of a role to sing, and sometimes, of course, you will never have more than 6 performances, 2 cycles.
Right.
They never make sense financially to a singer unless you can balance it by having concerts. But I take my hat off to all these magnificent Wagnerians who go around the world singing the same role every time. It's just astounding to be a part of. Somebody like Gerhard Siegel, for instance, who sing Logan, Mime all over the world, with a voice of iron, and it never marks in a rehearsal. He's all constantly singing away, enjoying everything in his mother tongue, which is just astounding. And I've had the privilege of singing with some exceptional Wagnerian singers on the stage, and I even won the Wagner bursary when I was 19 years old, Matthew. Yes. So what you got from that was you went to Bayreuth, and I, as a very, very young, naive, wet behind the ears bass baritone, was able to see the Flying Dutchman. I was able to see Siegfried with a Welsh soprano singing Brunhilde called Anne Evans. I was able to go and see all the museums, and so it gave me an appetite for Wagner. Even auditioned on the stage, but they knew.
Oh, you did? Oh, wow.
Yeah, they knew it was too early. I sang Wolfram's aria to the Evening Star, Wie Todesahnung, to all the Wagner family who were there.
Oh my goodness!
And they enjoyed it, and they could have put that contract in front of me for the next 20 years, but they didn't.
Well, they're lost. But I found when I went to Bayreuth, you begin to understand much more of the orchestration as well, right? It's the orchestra submerged, layers and layers down, and it has such a different timbre to it than if in a regular pit situation. Yeah. So you feel like the wellspring from which these operas came.
Yeah, you wouldn't have to worry about the brass section on the left side. They'd be down in the bottom.
They're in the sub basement. Well, Bryn, we have a few minutes left, and we've talked about the poster on your right-hand side. I want to ask you about the poster on your left-hand side. And I believe you have a love of railways, right? And you're a supporter of the Welsh Highland Railway. As the father of a almost 9-year-old who is passionate about railways, I'm curious, did that love of rail originate in childhood, and what's it meant to you to be involved with those projects?
Well, I think this might be something that's on Wikipedia, Matthew. I think the Welsh Railway put that in to find some, because honestly, I don't know anything about trains, and although
I should have done better research.
No, you're absolutely right, because behind me, of course, it is about the Western Railway, but it is to buy a ticket from Paris to Wales. I thought it was beautiful in that section. But having said that, I'm one of 3 personalities that has a train named after them, which goes to the summit of Snowdonia. So if you don't want to walk up Wales's highest mountain, you can take a train right up to the summit, and you can take my train, Sir Bryn Terfel, as well. Maybe I should delve more into the ins and outs of railway. Sorry, Matthew.
I wish we had taken the Sir Bryn Terfel train. I remember a family holiday to Snowdonia when I was quite young, and we attempted to go up Snowdon. We left very late in the day. We had no water. I think everyone was in sandals. We could not have been less well prepared. We got pretty close, but in the end, I think we came down for fear of invoking search and rescue. You also have a whiskey named after you, am I right? Not only a train, but a whiskey.
Yes, well, it's a part of the Welsh Icon series.
Yes.
That a distillery just up in the valleys here. It's about 20 minutes away. And they are called Penderyn, which is the head of the bird. And they had the certain bottles named after a famous rugby player, Gareth Edwards, the independence signatures, the Welsh connection to that from America.
Yes.
And they chose Falstaff as their bottle for me and Penderyn. Unfortunately, Matthew, they've sold out of that. And of course, they can't bring it back, but it was a beautiful sherry cask whiskey, very soft, beautifully balanced, and the bottle was well designed. It was very voluptuous. It was like a red operatic seat. So if you can find one, buy it and keep it.
Dash it away and save it. And
yes, yeah.
Well, Bryn, I can't thank you enough for taking this time with us. And, from all of us here in San Francisco, I wanted to also wish you congratulations. You and your wife, Hannah, you just had a new baby last summer, Alfie, and I just wanted to send you all of our love and congratulations as a new father again. And just know that we're thinking of you, and we're so excited to have this Falstaff again with us this weekend. I know everyone's been so excited to see it, and just you mean so much to this industry. You bring so much beauty to our lives. Your spirit is just indomitable, and it's a great pleasure to have you as part of this company. I dearly hope we can bring you back to San Francisco before too long and find something to do together. But thank you for taking this time. It just means so much to have this conversation together, and for our audiences, thank you for tuning in and for your deep connection to this company. It's been really wonderful, Bryn.
Oh, thank you very much. And from the bottom of my heart, take care, stay safe, and happy St. David's Day.
A very happy St. David's Day to you too, Bryn. Thank you, and stay creative, and we'll see you again singing soon.
Thank you very much.
Take care, Bryn.